Hey everyone, welcome to the most opinionated space podcast on the internet, Ad Astra,
the podcast where we talk about the intersection between space, policy, and technology.
I'm Jack.
And I'm Newton.
I have a Master's of Public Policy degree with a concentration in Science and Space Policy.
And I'm a PhD in Computer Science and an all-around tech geek.
All right, we have yet to set the deadline for voting, and also may have yet to announce or really put up the voting. But I promise that by the time you are listening to this episode, you will be able to go to the Ad Astra Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Ad Astra podcast, and vote for your favorite T-shirt design.
We should do that fairly soon. You're right.
We should. The contest ended about 2 weeks ago, but we've been combing through the various late submissions because we're good people like that. And we have 3 very good submissions that will be up on our Facebook page for you to vote on as you're listening to this episode. Anyway, so before we get started today, I wanted to remind everyone about the little fundraiser that I'm doing. It's for RAINN, which stands for the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. They are a great nonprofit organization that focuses on combating sexual violence, harassment, and assault. And just sort of with everything that's been going on with the Me Too campaign, the seemingly daily announcements or revelations that some Hollywood bigwig or person at Fox News is guilty of sexual violence, harassment, or assault, and that we gotta stand up for our people. It's got to stand up for those of us that need it. So please donate. I think I've already surpassed. Last I checked, I surpassed $200. And I'm going to keep upping the goal for the fundraiser. So please donate. And if you don't remember, I'm going to be donating $1 for every time I've seen a Me Too post. I'm currently at 37.
I was going to say, so I'm doing the same thing, but are you going as you see them, or are you going to tabulate them up at by the time the fundraiser ends?
I'm going as I see them right now.
Okay.
But with this will come up in our Space News highlight of the week. This week is going to be a very busy week for me, so I'm probably going to go back in time and search the hashtag and search for the keywords.
That's totally my plan. Yeah.
Facebook makes it very easy to just look at who of your friends have used such hashtag or such keyword. But that's sort of what I've been doing so far, and maybe at some point I will lose track and have to do that method as well. But as it stands, I'm at $37. So let's get more people on this bandwagon. You got both of the hosts of the Ad Astra podcast going for $1 for every Me Too post. So let's get some more folks out there to do that. But yeah, so the in the show notes, it's the first link this week is for the fundraiser that I put on Facebook, which is a great feature on Facebook. I very much like that. But Newton, take us through what we're going to be covering in this shortened episode this week.
On to the show. In latest from Washington, we're going to be talking about the Senate Commerce Committee hearing on the commercial satellite industry. In the Space News highlight of the week, this is going to be a planetary episode. We're going to be talking about an upcoming Planetary Society event, and probably the first time that we've had a coming soon to space as the Space News highlight of the week, but we really want you folks to come out for this. So.
I think it is. Except for Cassini. Cassini was, I think, the Space News highlight of the week, and it was coming up. But what we were covering was not necessarily that event itself.
Right. Anyway, in international news, we'll talk about Luxembourgers syncing up with Alphabet to help out Puerto Rico. In latest in tech, we've got a couple of quick stories. One in which SpaceX is getting paid to do some of the amazing things that they claim they could do on their own. And and we'll talk about a new NASA study that's helping us improve the way that we search for habitable worlds, habitable exoplanets, and things like that. So, Jack, take it away. Latest in Washington.
All right. So the only real thing that we got coming up in this next week that's happening in Washington that isn't our space news highlight of the week is that the Senate Commerce, Science, and Justice Committee, the committee in charge of everything space, is having a hearing called What's Up and What's on the Horizon for the Commercial Satellite Industry. So as many of you are aware, the commercial satellite industry has sort of existed a lot longer than a lot of other commercial space sectors, and has probably the most potential, especially when it comes to telecommunications, remote sensing, and remote imaging. Has kind of covers a lot of major needs within the existing and developing economy. So the Senate Commerce Committee is holding this hearing and has 4 people who are representing 4 major companies, one being SpaceX. So Patricia Cooper, who is Vice President of Satellite Government Affairs for SpaceX, will be one of the witnesses. Mark Dankberg, who is CEO of Viasat, which is a satellite industry company. Then there's going to be Steven Spengler, who is CEO of Intelsat, one of the largest and longest existing commercial satellite companies. And then Greg Weiler, who is founder and executive chairman of OneWeb, which if you haven't been following, OneWeb is one of the more recent architectures that have come out and said, hey, if we send up enough small satellites to act as nodes in space, that you can have fiber level bandwidth connectivity on Earth using a satellite infrastructure. I think the current estimate is something like 150. I know SpaceX wants to do a similar thing, but it's like going to be like 750 satellites or something. But it's going to be like at such a low orbit. It's think one of the lowest orbits you can get and still be in orbit. But so this will be a very interesting hearing. If you are in DC, you can head on over to the Russell Senate Office Building, room 253. If not, there's going to be a live video of the hearing.
I was going to say, there's going to be a webcast?
There will be a webcast. It's on the Senate Commerce website, and it starts at 10 a.m.
What do we anticipate really happening with this? So they're talking about the commercial satellite industry. What are some of the sort of goals of each of these 4 executives going into this meeting?
Well, the goal of a lot of them is to, of anything in commercial, is to make money off of this.
Sure.
I guess specifically what SpaceX wants to do is lower the threshold that they have to reach for sending up so many satellites. So in order to send anything into space, you need to clear it through the FAA, AST, the Commercial Space Transportation Office, which we talked about the previous couple weeks. So SpaceX,
as well as FCC and Department of Commerce. Yes,
yeah. So there's multiple avenues that you have to go down in order to get your satellite launched. And for companies like SpaceX or OneWeb who want to send up massive constellations, that's a lot of paperwork they have to file, and it's not a very dynamic system, the federal government. So it's not going to be able to sort of meet the changes occurring within the commercial market. And I mean, you could very well see the commercial satellite industry take a hit if the government's not able to efficiently and effectively regulate what's going on the ground and going into space. So what we're going to see, I think, across all 4 of them is for there to be a shift in the process for obtaining the licenses to send things into space. I think that, and we saw that at the National Space Council meeting this month, and we've seen that in previous committee hearings, that the whole idea is to streamline and make it efficient and effective, but answer all of the questions. There shouldn't be any uncertainty, or as little uncertainty as humanly possible within the commercial space sector, right. And especially in a chunk that I think, if I remember correctly, is about $350 billion a year. industry, the commercial satellite industry.
I can see that number being right.
It's I think for telecommunications.
I was going to say telecom is
like $10 trillion or something, and this is like a drop in the bucket. But it's a growing industry, and especially with companies like SpaceX and OneWeb wanting to develop remote. I guess that'd be remote connectivity. So we have remote sensing, remote imaging. The next thing is remote connectivity. And if they can't
what it really
that,
is evenly distributed connectivity, because that's the problem, right? Like in the U.S., looking at the U.S. alone, we have, significant broadband access in the cities, but not so much in rural areas. Whereas this is sort of an evenly distributed internet capability, equal access for all. Even though you're leasing it, you're paying for it. There's a number of companies that are using this approach both for regular service and emergency service, which we'll get to coming up. But yeah, the part of this is there's just so many places on Earth that don't have access, and there is an I know people don't like to believe that companies want to have sort of this altruistic sense, but there are people that are running these companies, and they want the ability to distribute internet all over Earth. At the same time, if they are the company that is able to successfully do that, and the biggest vendor for that, they will make a load of money. One swear this episode, Tom, I swear.
It's not an angry episode.
Yeah, it's not an angry episode.
But yeah, I think if they're able to bring down the cost of remote connectivity, because I think you're right.
For the consumer, it'll be low cost. For the consumer, it should be fairly low cost after a few years. I don't think initially, but after a few years, it should be low cost.
Well, but remember what they said about satellite phones.
Significant amount of money. What's that?
Remember satellite phones.
I remember satellite phones.
Granted, that existed. Satellite phones were a proposed shift in the way that telecommunications happened, and there wasn't really an alternative until a better alternative came into being, which is the cell system that we currently use. But there's nothing really that's better than wireless access to the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Like that. I mean, that's just overall like far and away better. Because I mean, if you're in the global south and you're in Africa or in Central Asia or wherever it happens to be, or even parts of rural America, that it's expensive to lay down fiber. And if it's a town of like 300 people, does Google really think there's that much money to be made there to lay down fiber? Does Verizon really think there's enough there? No. So you have things like OneWeb, SpaceX, or the number of other companies that are proposing this come in, and if you can provide equal access to the internet across the globe, it will reduce cost, I think. I mean, I would certainly be interested in taking it up. Granted, I do live in a major city, and it might not be as great on average for city dwellers, but it would be able to bridge that digital divide that exists between generally between the global north and the global south,
and get rid of places, get rid of things like a shortage of option with vendors. Like your Comcast customer service representative might actually be nice to you the next time they talk to you, because they're not your only option. Yeah, that's not their brand. That's a bit too far. Maybe that's just me dreaming way too far. I think Elon Musk will get to Mars first
before Comcast has good customer service.
Yeah, exactly.
Come at me, Comcast. I got Verizon.
Right, I got RCN, DC all day.
Hey, RCN. When I had RCN at my old place, it was between RCN and Comcast, and I refused to get Comcast.
Oh yeah, me too. Yeah,
and I will say, if you are any of you listeners who are looking for internet access and only have two options, and it's Comcast and RCN, I would highly recommend RCN. Their customer service,
folks in the DC area,
their customer service, every time I interacted with them, it was a good experience.
Yep, same here. So
yeah.
Wait, why are we advertising them now?
Yeah, I know they're not paying us. But yeah, so back to the whole commercial satellite thing. Exactly. That's gonna be a major topic of discussion, is how best the Commerce Committee can help reorganize the commercial space regulatory regime to better benefit these companies who are on the cutting edge of some very vital technology for the development of humankind as a connected, equal opportunity species. But that's just the aspirational in me. The Commerce Committee doesn't have that much it has jurisdiction over how the regulations get put into place, but they don't spend the money. So,
yeah. So, anyway, I think we are about ready, if that's all you have for latest in Washington, for our space news highlight of the week. And Jack, since you're actually attending most of this event, I'll let you take it away.
Since I am planning both of these events. So that's it for latest in Washington. So in the next week, not even in the next week, in the next 12 hours of you listening to this podcast, yes, I'm talking to you, the listener, that there will be two awesome events happening on Capitol Hill with the Planetary Society. What's the Planetary Society, you ask? Well, it's the world's largest space advocacy organization, started in 1980 by Carl Sagan, Lou Friedman, and Bruce Murray. It's currently headed up by none other than Bill Nye, the science guy.
It sounds like you've given this speech before.
I think I have a couple times. But so the Planetary Society, we're sort of upping our profile in DC and working towards having more events like the ones that I will describe. But the first thing that we're going to be doing is from 3 to 5 p.m. in the James Madison room of the James Madison building of the Library of Congress. There will be a sort of science fair booth type situation called After Cassini, What's Next for Outer Planets. And the whole purpose of this is to bring in members of the scientific community, members of the the commercial community, and the government, and bring them all into the same room and have the first two groups present to people on Capitol Hill what they're working on, why it's important for outer planet research. I mean, because for a lot of these outer planet exploration missions, they have the opportunity to maybe discover life, or at least find the remnants of where life may have existed. I mean,
but you have to choose wisely, though.
You do have to choose very wisely
because they take a really long time and they're a lot of money.
And we saw just recently that with Cassini ending, we're at least 14 years away still of a return to Saturn proper. I know there's talk of going to Enceladus or Titan, but I mean, there's so much that we want to do in the outer planets, and a lot that we can discover, a lot of questions we can answer that were posed by Cassini, that are being posed by Juno, that are being posed by OSIRIS-REx and New Horizons, that we don't have follow-on missions yet in the pipeline. So this is the call to members of Congress saying, if you're interested in Neptune, if you're interested in Saturn or the Galilean moons of Jupiter, that this is your opportunity to invest government resources, non-biased government resources into exploration missions. And so some of the panelists that are, I guess not panelists, but booths that we're going to have there, we have the usuals like Lockheed Martin and Boeing. Boeing is also representing the Space Launch System. We have STSI, which is the... It's what's STSI?
Space Telescope and Science Institute.
Yeah, Space Telescope Science Institute. The Applied Physics Lab is going to be there. The folks up at Johns Hopkins, as well as plenty of members of Congress. We just confirmed today that Senator Gary Peters, my senator actually in Michigan, he's going to be there, as well as Derek Kilmer, who is a congressman from Washington State, and he's trying to sort of make his name in the space community. And I've heard him speak before, and Representative Kilmer is a great advocate for space and a great friend of the society. So be sure, if you can make it out, 3 to 5, Library of Congress. The other thing we got going on is in conjunction with the After Cassini event, the director of space policy and friend of the show, Dreier, who was on the Mars episode a couple weeks ago, is in town for the After Cassini event. And also Jason Callahan, the space policy advisor for the society, lives in DC. So both of them are going to be on Capitol Hill for the After Cassini event, as well as meetings with members of Congress prior to that. And then we're going to go over to the Capitol Lounge at 5:30. Capitol Lounge is a sort of hot spot, a little watering hole for congressional staffers. And it's going to be taking place 5:30 to 7:30. And it's just a sort of happy hour, come discuss space policy with two of the best and brightest minds. And then also Casey and Jason will be there. Yeah, so those are our two main events. If you are listening to this podcast on Wednesday, come down to the Capitol. I know a lot of people work and aren't going to be able to make the reception, but we have a happy hour afterward. And I'm sure, 5:30 to 7:30 is a loose time frame. So feel free to drop on by anytime during those hours and stay after if you want. I'm sure we'll be there.
Yeah, I will be meeting up with you guys afterwards because I have a number of things to do on Wednesday, unfortunately.
And so if you're listening to this podcast and it is Thursday, I am sorry, but you have missed our two awesome Planetary Society events. But I promise you, November, there is some pretty cool stuff that is in the works. So stay tuned.
Okay, cool. So yeah, once again, just hit Jack or myself up on Facebook, Twitter, or any of those things if you guys need more information in the next 12 hours, or more information about future events of the like. So moving on to international news, we have Luxembourgers and the folks over at Alphabet, Google's parent company, helping out folks in Puerto Rico. So, contrary to what you may see in our current news cycles, Puerto Rico is still in a huge world of trouble after they were hit by a Category 5 storm mid last month. And they will be in the main areas for months and outside of the cities for years to come. Approximately 3 million of its residents are still without electricity after the island was devastated by Hurricane Maria last month. Jack, how many people are in Puerto Rico?
5.8 million?
No, it's 3.4 million people. So, yeah, approximately 3 million residents are still without electricity. 3 million out of 3.4 million. So, yes, and about 30%, then that's a little over 1 million people, they still lack access to drinkable water. And, I mean, I've been reading up on some of even just the latest statistics on what's still going on over there. Just over half of their hospitals are now open. Only 45 of 70 hospitals are currently operating with electricity, according to FEMA officials. And according to FEMA as well, there's a severe food shortage, that makes sense because of the trouble that they've been having getting things shipped there. And, people lack appropriate storage. It's a Caribbean island. It's hot, so on and so forth. But exacerbating the process of recovery is the fact that communication infrastructure in general and the internet specifically is experiencing trouble across the entire U.S. territory. So this is where X, which is a company owned by Alphabet, the parent of Google, after that whole restructuring, comes in. Specifically, we're talking about Alphabet's Project Loon, which on October 20th announced that it had officially switched on its balloon-powered internet for some Puerto Rican residents. That means giant balloons providing digital connectivity for some people who might otherwise just go without. They are working with Luxembourg's SES networks and their high throughput and fiber-like satellite connectivity service and local telecommunications expertise are playing a key role in restoring 4G/LTE connectivity in the disaster-affected island. Specifically, the cell coverage is being provided by a capability they call O3B Fast Connect. It's a rapidly deployable satellite terminal that delivers fiber-like performance. SES Network's Fast Connect solution it's a transportable temporary use and managed network connectivity solution with data rates over 1.6 gigabits per second. And the terminals that they have are transportable, meaning that they can move them around to different parts of the island. This is a regular service that they offer, but are clearly, making many exceptions here for Puerto Rico to help give folks internet connectivity across the island. This is just another example of a company like OneWeb who really wants to just be able to distribute internet across the world and are looking for customers to do so. So while they are doing something extremely altruistic here, they may have fairly permanent customers, both in Puerto Rico and South America. But when all of this is said and done, this is also something I caught wind of earlier this month. The FCC, or the Federal Communications Commission, issued an experimental license to X back on October 7th. And at that point, X still didn't have a telecommunications partner for the project. The FCC is allowing them to fly up to 30 balloons. And folks over at X are saying that while they're extremely happy to do this, it is still experimental. It's not going to be perfect, but effectively they're going to have balloons serving as stations, communicating to ground stations and just individual terminals, as the balloons communicate with the satellites in order to distribute internet. So I'm hoping we're going to keep an eye on this story. I'm hoping this is a good solution for folks who still haven't gotten into contact with their families over there. I believe what is it? I think it was over 60% of the telecommunications infrastructure got knocked out. I think it was a little over 60%. So this is a great solution for that problem. 68% of Puerto Rico cell sites are still out of service, which is insane.
Now just imagine if instead of having to deploy emergency balloons, there was just a infrastructure already in place, maybe space-based, that would provide internet access and cellular connectivity. But that is a very, uplifting story in a very trying time.
So you still have problems. You still have problems even when it is space-based, because a lot of even the ones that they're talking about that are space-based still rely for further distribution on terrestrial stations. Yeah. So if those stations get knocked out, then you're screwed. But then those are just a few individual stations that you actually need to fix, as opposed to the entire network. Right. So
and I think this shows the ingenuity of people in the tech world in figuring out ways to take a technology that they're maybe developing for profit and implement it in an emergency situation, and also maybe gain some customers that way. I know that the balloon-based, not space-based, connectivity has sort of been. It's been like an interesting thing to follow, but hasn't been monetized quite yet. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's still in a developmental phase, but it's good to see that maybe this will lead to further usage of that technology in more inaccessible parts of the world.
Yep. So, good luck to X and SES, folks over in Luxembourg. We'll keep an eye on that story as we go forward. So, latest in tech, Air Force adds more than $40 million to SpaceX engine contract. The U.S. Air Force has provided SpaceX with an additional $40.766 million to support continued development of the company's Raptor engine. This is the engine that Elon Musk talked about significantly, both at the IAC a couple weeks ago, as well as on his AMA on Reddit last week. This is a part of the Air Force's Evolved Expendable Launch Vehicle program. That program provides the U.S. assured access to space, defined as at least 2 launch systems or families of launch systems with 3 families of launch vehicles. So the Atlas V, the Delta IV, and Falcon 9 upgrade. those launch vehicles will have to provide critical space lift capability to support DoD and other national security missions. So it's basically the way that the U.S. ensures we have some access to space. There are these private companies developing things for them. That program has actually successfully launched more than 70 national security space launches in support of Air Force, NRO, the Navy, Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, and Vandenberg Air Force Base. So they want to continue this with Raptor. According to the announcement that you can read on the Air Force page, the work would be carried out at NASA's Stennis Space Center, which hosts engine testing for the Raptor. It will also be carried out at SpaceX headquarters in California and at Los Angeles Air Force Base. Like I said, we talked about the Raptor a couple of weeks ago, so I won't dive too far into it, but it's a liquid oxygen and methane engine that SpaceX is developing for its BFR launch system. The updated design of the BFR was what Elon Musk unveiled at IAC and discussed further at the AMA, and it uses 31 Raptor engines in a reusable booster stage and 7 engines in the upper spaceship capable of placing 150 metric tons into low Earth orbit or carrying out missions to the moon and Mars. We hope.
Elon hopes.
The statement didn't include any additional information about the nature of the work. Obviously, if NRO and Air Force is putting up satellites, it's not going to. But the only thing that they included was that the work should be completed by the end of April 2018, at which point I'm sure it will get another contract. So this is actually in contrast to... So I just read this like a few minutes ago. Blue Origin put up a satellite. Blue Origin announced on October 19th that is carrying out tests of their BE-4 engine, which also uses liquid oxygen and liquefied natural gas propellant. So they're still trying to catch up. They're not, getting this level of contracts yet, but hopefully they'll be a competitor, because it's always good when companies like that are able to compete. So it's good for everyone.
Yeah. And that's been a common theme, I think, within the Air Force and the defense community, is to branch out from solely using ULA. Or Orbital or Northrop Grumman in developing these, and start asking the quote unquote new space companies to take the helm on the development of some key technology for them.
No, being in contracting in that space, I definitely saw a number of places where there's a very deliberate effort to get more than just the same old folks who have been there for forever, the Raytheons, Northrop Grummans, Lockheeds, and so on. Just because, one, it's good for the U.S. economy overall. 2, it's good for generating solutions because you have new people, new ideas, things like that. And 3, you're helping to grow new partners who have the potential to be as strong as a Raytheon, a Lockheed, and so on and so forth. The more of those that exist, the stronger the DoD can get in terms of technological innovation. So good luck to SpaceX on that one. Hopefully they'll build up their Raptor engine, and we'll see how far they go. We'll see if it gets to the point where we can actually get to Mars by 2024.
We'll see about that.
All we need is an engine, right? That's what it's all about. It's just the engine. That's really what's stopping us.
Radiation shielding is not a thing that we need or anything.
Look, if you have strong enough boosters, you're just shielded from all that radiation, right? you scare it away with the raw power of the engine. No. But anyway, on to the last story and latest in tech, and then we'll get out of here. Like we said, it's going to be a short episode today. But a new NASA study improves the search for habitable worlds. So this one is with regard to a recent paper that was published in the Astrophysical Journal on October 17th. But there's a new NASA research effort and new publications that are coming out. They're helping to refine our understanding of candidate planets beyond our solar system that might actually support life. Right. So we have all of these ways of figuring out whether or not something's a planet or not. Now we're trying to dive a little deeper and say, how do we focus on the ones that may actually be able to support life. And according to the lead author of the paper, Yuka Fuji, using a model that more realistically simulates atmospheric conditions, they were able to discover a new process that controls the habitability of exoplanets and that will guide them in identifying candidates for further study. Fuji's a researcher at NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies that everyone forgets about, that exists in New York, and at the Earth Life Science Institute at the Tokyo Institute of Technology in Japan. It was sort of a joint effort between those two groups. So the search for habitable planets requires detailed modeling, and I've given a super long spiel about modeling before with respect to our climate science capabilities on this show. So go back like 20 episodes or something like that. if you want to,
or like last episode.
Did I talk a lot about modeling in the last episode?
I don't think. No, we didn't talk about modeling. We did talk about climate change.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's just a given.
Yeah, just climate change in general is
We're paid by big science to mention climate change at least 3
exactly.
times.
Do you know what it's like to get paid by hundreds of thousands of independent scientists, each with their own agendas? It's great. But so the models that they're talking about here calculate factors that would allow a planet to support liquid water, which is typically what we see as a requirement to support life as we know it using simulations. For instance, it has to be just far enough from its parent star that the atmosphere isn't so cold that bodies of water freeze, but not so hot that they evaporate. And previous models simulated atmospheric conditions sort of along one dimension, the vertical. Like some other recent habitability studies, the new research that's been published here uses a model that calculates conditions in all 3 dimensions, allowing the team to simulate the circulation of the atmosphere and the special features of that circulation, which one-dimensional models just inherently can't do. The new work will help astronomers allocate scarce observing time to the most promising candidates for habitability. So this is going to play big when it comes to James Webb, where we point that telescope, where we prioritize where to point that telescope. Some of this research should guide that. So yeah, when planets are losing their oceans due to evaporation, they enter what's called a moist greenhouse state as the water vapor rises into the stratosphere and the hydrogen atoms break apart from the oxygen atoms to escape into space, eventually resulting in the loss of the planet's oceans. The new research that they discovered here details how a star's radiation influences how the atmosphere of an exoplanet circulates and plays a role specifically in that creating that moist greenhouse state. Planets that orbit a low mass star, the most common kind of star in our galaxy, would have to be closer to that star than the Earth is to the sun in order to support life, since a low mass star is cooler and dimmer. If you remember, this was the case with TRAPPIST-1. Most of those stars were closer to most of those planets were closer to their star than Earth is to the sun. But so the gravity from that close of a star would slow down the rotation of the planet, and it might even become locked, sort of how the moon is tidally locked with us, just meaning that one side would perpetually face the star and one side would just continuously face away from the star. In turn, the planet would form a thick layer of clouds on the perpetually sunny side, and then the near infrared radiation from the star and cooler stars emit more of this radiation than hotter ones do, actually, interacts with the water vapor in the air and the droplets and ice crystals in the clouds to warm up the air, creating that moist greenhouse state. And the new model basically demonstrates this, that since these stars emit the bulk of their light at those NIR wavelengths, a moist greenhouse state will result even in conditions comparable to or somewhat warmer than the tropics of the Earth. For exoplanets closer to their stars, the team found that the NIR-driven process increased moisture in the stratosphere gradually. So it's possible, contrary to old model predictions, that an exoplanet closer to its parent star could remain habitable. So that's an important observation.
Yeah, I mean, because the whole thing about the Goldilocks zone, I remember learning about that, a decade or so ago, as that was the only way to tell if a planet is habitable or not. And in science fiction, even in scientific proposals or research, they mention that the habitable zone, the Goldilocks zone, is the only way that there would ever be life on a planet. But I guess that habitable zone is a lot more.
Well, it
fluid.
depends on a number of variables, right? It's almost a constraint satisfaction problem, probabilistic.
It's almost like it's a complex system.
It's almost like it's a complex system. Well, and so this is the thing. Like, I know I keep saying the important thing here is, but the important thing here is, since they're doing this with low mass stars, and low mass stars are the most common in the galaxy, that means that we know how to quickly identify whether or not planets near low mass stars are habitable, which means that increases the odds that a habitable world will be found among them, because they're the most common that we have in the galaxy. So we got really good at that. They're the most common one. We're likely to find something, hopefully, among the billions and billions of stars in the galaxy. So yeah, that's an interesting piece of research that was found, once again, up at the Goddard Institute of Space Studies, up in New York. They're obviously going to continue with this research, likely apply it to a significant number of significant number of model data that we already have, and continue forward. But if you want to take a look at the paper is called NIR Driven Moist Upper Atmospheres of Synchronously Rotating Temperate Terrestrial Exoplanets. So it's an interesting read.
I can't wait for the movie to come out.
The day a movie comes out about an academic published paper. Oh, God.
Isn't that what an inconvenient truth is?
Close enough.
Anyway, big science has paid my bills this month then. But all right, yeah, so I also pointed out, as you said earlier, Blue Origin tested their BE4 engine on the 19th, I think, is when they announced they did.
Yeah.
So I have included in the Space News article about that.
Yeah.
It's interesting read. Again, new space company developing engines, which old space companies haven't done in quite a while.
Yeah. And ULA is actually considering using that BE4 on the first stage of their Vulcan rocket. So I saw that
it was like a $30 million contract or something like that to develop that.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I wanted to point out was, I guess, on the flip side of all this great innovation and technological advancement, there are companies that fall by the wayside, and one of which is XCOR Aerospace, which was a small aerospace company. They, I think XCOR started after the X Prize, but it was like sort of trying to achieve the same thing. Back in 2004,
I do remember hearing about them. Yeah.
Yeah, and XCOR Aerospace was developing a 2-seater suborbital space plane. As you can see, space planes are a very popular design, even after the shuttle. And it's called the Lynx, and it's 2-person, specifically designed for space tourism and some research applications. Earlier this year in June, XCOR laid off its entire staff due to a financial concern. And they brought a number of them back on as part-time contractors, but really haven't been able to pay them much because of the financial concerns still plaguing the company. And with losing their whole staff, they can't go out to get new contracts. And they are, according to this article in Space News, they're I think it's only a couple weeks until they're have to liquidate, meaning they have to go out of business, file Chapter 7. Early November is what the President Bloom of XCOR said. So that's unfortunate that we see another space company fall to the wayside. We've seen a lot of that.
It's just like every other. I won't call what we're in a space boom just yet, unless space booms are much like everything else in space. They just are at a much larger scale than is perceivable to us. But that's how companies in booms. That's what happens to them, right? Some companies get bought, some companies become huge, and quite a few just fail. So
so this is just a simple reminder that nothing is guaranteed in space, and it's a very hard endeavor. So I guess our hearts go out to the folks who used to work at XCOR, and hopefully they're working for other aerospace companies now. But so I guess to finish out the episode, we're just at about 45 minutes now. So again, it's a quick episode. I wanted to announce 2 awesome events coming up in the next couple weeks. The first being the wonderful Astronomy on Tap, taking place next Monday, October 30th, at DC9. It starts at 8 p.m. 8 p.m. to sort of whenever. The cool thing about this one is that Newton and I are going to be the judges for the Halloween costume contest.
Look at that.
Well, we're going to be the quote unquote judges. Yes. We're going to be determining who gets the loudest cheers.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a lot of fun. Once again, DC on Tap is Astronomy on Tap, not DC on Tap. I believe that's an actual bar here.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Astronomy on Tap is one of my favorite space events to go to. That's a fairly regular event in DC. So you guys should come out, wear your costumes. Jack and I will judge you harshly, extremely critically, may make some of you cry, but it'll be a good time. I promise.
Yeah. And there's 2 very interesting, or 3 actually, performances / speeches that'll be going on. So one of them is from Amber Strawn, who is at Goddard working on James Webb Space Telescope, talking about infant galaxies and alien atmospheres. So if you found Newton's and I's discussion just about a minute ago interesting, then you should definitely tune in for that. The next one is from Rob Coker, Tyranny of the Rocket Equation. And finally, there is a musical guest, Sarah Stardust.
Oh, Sarah Stardust.
So,
I've heard her sing.
And then we will be doing our Halloween costume contest, which we will judge. So yeah, definitely come out to that. The other thing that we got in the pipeline right now is on Saturday, November 11th at 6 p.m. Nerd Night is hosting their November meeting in conjunction with the DC Podfest. And it's going to be I guess it's sort of like, it's not a TEDx talk, but it's of similar style that it's going to be us. Mary Seke, Accents on the Brain is her podcast. And then Doug Parsons, America Adapts is his podcast. And the 3 of our groups are going to be making presentations and doing talks. Ours, the Ad Astra talk, is going to be about how to be a space advocate. The Ad Astra Guide to Aiming for the Stars. Yeah, so it's gonna be very interesting. Tickets are available for Nerd Night, and that's also, I think, taking place at DC9. So 2 awesome events coming up within the next couple weeks. We will definitely be pushing out the Nerd Night one, but we really only have this episode to push out the Astronomy on Tap. So if you're going to prioritize anything to do on Monday night, it's going to be going to DC9 Nightclub.
Absolutely.
For Astronomy on Tap.
Absolutely.
So I guess if that's it for you, Newton, that's it for me.
Yep.
As always, check out us on Facebook, Twitter. We have an Instagram still, I think. Donate to my fundraiser for RAINN.
And speaking of your fundraiser, we just had a new episode of the Straight Up podcast coming out. It's going to be a multi-series episode, so you'll want to check that out. Go to facebook.com/straight up podcast. And don't forget to check out Reminiscent as well. While we're advertising shows on the network. Special thanks
we got 3 awesome shows.
And as always, special thanks to our producer, Tom Kelly, our super producer.
We love you, Tom.
All right.
All right. Well, as always, I'm Jack.
And I'm Newton.
Ad Astra.